The morning I accidentally kissed my boyfriend's older brother, I was holding a folder of architectural renderings and thinking about load-bearing walls. That's the part nobody believes. That my brain was genuinely somewhere else when it happened. But that's the truth. I was 3 weeks from the biggest deadline of my career, running on coffee and 4 hours of sleep, and when a man in a gray suit walked through the door of the Callaway Hotel's private dining room, my body just moved. 2 months of greeting Callum the same way. Same height, same dark hair, same way of carrying himself like the room had been waiting for him. My arms went up. My lips touched his cheek, then the corner of his mouth. When he turned his head at the wrong moment, he went very still, and I knew immediately. The way you know when you've reached for a glass of water in the dark and grabbed something else entirely. The cologne was different. Callum wore something warm and familiar, like cedar and soap. This man wore something older, darker, vetiver, and something I couldn't name. His jaw was sharper. The stillness wasn't surprise. It was patience. I stepped back and looked at his face, which was Callum's face but wasn't, and the folder slipped out of my hands and scattered renderings across the marble floor. "Wrong, brother," he said quietly. Not unkind, not amused. Just stating a fact, the way you'd read a sign you'd misread from a distance. "I'm Donovan." That was how I met Donovan Hale. Callum and I had been together since April. We met at a mutual friend's rooftop thing in Midtown. He spilled his drink on my blazer, apologized with about 3 times more sincerity than the situation required, and then stayed at my side for the next 4 hours talking about exactly nothing important. He was easy. That's the word I kept coming back to. Easy in the way that good things sometimes are when you've spent a long time with hard things. He ran a mid-sized logistics company his father had started in Connecticut. Ethical, profitable, low drama. He texted me every morning. He remembered small things, that I hated cilantro, that I needed silence in cabs, that my mother's birthday was in March. He was the kind of man I'd been telling myself I wanted for years. I was a structural engineer at a firm that specialized in adaptive reuse. We took old buildings and made them functional again without erasing what they were. I was good at it. I was also perpetually behind schedule on my current project, a historic hotel renovation in Midtown that had been delayed 3 times by contractor issues and twice by my own insistence on doing things right rather than fast. When Callum mentioned his family Thanksgiving in Greenwich, I said yes before I finished processing the invitation. Meeting someone's family at 2 months is either too soon or exactly right, and I'd gotten better at reading which was which. "There's something I should probably tell you before we get there," he said the night before, while we were eating takeout at his apartment. His voice had that careful quality that makes you set down whatever you're holding. "Okay," I said, setting down my fork. "My brother will be there." A pause. My older brother Donovan. He and we don't have the easiest relationship, just wanted you to know going in. What kind of not easy? Callum turned his water glass in circles. He took over the family company after my father retired, the real company. I left and started something clean, which Donovan made very clear he considered a rejection of everything the family built. He looked up. He's not a bad person, he's just a lot, and he has a way of making everything feel like a test. A test of what? That's the thing. You never quite know. I filed it away. Family tension. Manageable. I'd survived worse things than a difficult older brother at a holiday dinner. What I hadn't prepared for was walking into the hotel bar, where Callum's family was having pre-dinner drinks, seeing the back of a man in a gray suit who had Callum's exact posture and hairline, and having my exhausted autopilot brain close the distance in about 4 seconds. The renderings scattered. Donovan looked down at them, then back at me, with an expression that gave absolutely nothing away. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I thought. Callum said you were identical and we're not identical." He crouched and started gathering the papers with the focus efficiency of someone who dealt with chaos by organizing it. "Fraternal. But we look alike enough that this happens occasionally." He stood and held out the folder. "You must be Imogen. I took it. Most people call me Imogen, yes." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, more like the beginning of interest. Callum appeared behind me, his hand warm on my back. "I see you've met, briefly," Donovan said. His eyes stayed on me a half-second longer than necessary, before he turned away. Thanksgiving dinner at the Hale family home in Greenwich was everything I'd braced for, and a few things I hadn't. The house was a federal-style colonial that had been in the family for 40 years. Good bones, I noticed immediately, the way I always did. Wide plank floors, original millwork, a fireplace in every main room. The kind of place that became itself over generations rather than being designed. Callum's mother, Charlotte, pulled me into a hug that smelled like mulled wine and dry-cleaned cashmere, and felt completely genuine. His father, Richard, shook my hand with a warmth that suggested he'd been hoping Callum would bring someone home for some time. A younger sister, Fiona, assessed me with friendly eyes and then declared I seemed actually fun, which I gathered was high praise. And then there was Donovan, who had changed into a darker jacket and was standing near the window with a glass of bourbon, watching the room with the quiet alertness of someone who never fully relaxed. He was the oldest by 4 years. He ran Hale Capital Group, the private equity firm Richard had built from a regional asset management company into something that moved money at a scale Callum's logistics operation didn't approach. He was unmarried, Charlotte mentioned, with the casual emphasis of someone who found this meaningful. He worked too much. He always worked too much, Richard said, with affection underneath the observation. Even as a boy. Donovan needed to understand how things functioned. Couldn't just accept that something worked, had to know why. Across the room, Donovan caught me listening and held my gaze for a moment before looking away. Dinner was loud in the best way. Multiple conversations running at once. Fiona's husband arguing good-naturedly with Richard about football. Charlotte trying to get everyone to try the cranberry thing she'd made from scratch. Callum sat beside me, easy and present, squeezing my hand when I glanced his way. Donovan sat directly across from me. He said little, but he paid attention the way some people do. Not obviously, not rudely, just with a quality of presence that made you aware of being observed. When I mentioned the hotel project, he asked 2 questions that were more specific than I expected, and then said nothing further when I answered, just nodded once with the look of someone filing information away. "What exactly is the complication?" he asked, during a lull. "On the project. The original load-bearing structure doesn't match the 1940s drawings, which means our renovation plan assumed support from columns that don't actually exist where they're supposed to. So the building was modified, multiple times, without adequate documentation. I reached for my water, which means I'm essentially doing forensic archaeology while also engineering a functional modern space. And on a deadline. Always on a deadline." His dark eyes held mine. "That sounds like the kind of problem you don't solve faster by working harder. You solve it by finding someone who's done it before." "I know," I said. "I am that person. This is the 3rd time." The corner of his mouth moved. Charlotte noticed and looked between us with an expression I didn't quite catch. After dinner, Callum got pulled into the kitchen to help with dishes. A family tradition, apparently, that he'd missed the last 2 Thanksgivings, and was being gently guilted about. I wandered to the sitting room and stood in front of a built-in bookshelf that covered an entire wall. "You're looking at the molding," Donovan said from behind me. I hadn't heard him come in. "The corner blocking is wrong. Someone replaced it, probably in the 80s. Whoever did it used modern pine instead of matching the original oak profile." I glanced back at him. "It bothers me more than it should. It should bother you." He came to stand beside me, looking at the shelf. "My father knows. He's been meaning to have it fixed for 15 years. That's how it always goes." A pause. "Callum tells me you grew up in Baltimore." The subject shift was subtle enough that I almost missed it. "Until I was 17. Then Pittsburgh for college. Then here. You stayed. The work is here." I turned to face him. "You grew up here?" "Greenwich, then boarding school in Vermont, then Yale." A pause that carried weight. The path was fairly predetermined. "Do you mind that?" He looked at me with an attention that made the air in the room feel slightly different. "I used to. Now I'm more interested in what I've built within it than what might have existed outside." Footsteps in the hallway. Callum appeared, drying his hands on a dish towel, and took in the scene. Us standing close, a conversation he'd walked into the middle of, with a smile that was mostly easy and a little careful. "Dessert," he said. "Mom's doing the pie thing." I followed him out. Behind me, I could feel Donovan's attention the way you feel a room's temperature change. In the car on the way back to the city, Callum was quiet longer than usual. "He liked you," he said finally. I couldn't tell. That's how you know. He kept his eyes on the road. Donovan's usually running the room. Tonight he sat back and watched. He only does that when something genuinely interests him. I stared out at the highway lights. We talked about the project. And the bookshelf molding. Callum's voice had a quality I hadn't heard before. Just be careful, Imogen. Of your brother? Of how he operates. A pause. Donovan isn't cruel. He's not manipulative in an obvious way. He just has a way of making you feel like you're the most interesting thing he's ever seen, and it's hard to remember that he makes everyone feel that way. I didn't say anything, but I thought about the way he'd asked about the project. Not polite conversation, genuine curiosity. The way he'd said it should bother you, like a confirmation rather than a dismissal. I told myself it didn't matter. Callum was steady and good, and chose me every day without drama or calculation. That was worth more than whatever the alternative was. I told myself that all the way home. My best friend Priscilla had zero patience for self-deception. Tell me again why you're thinking about him, she said, from the other end of my kitchen island, 3 days later. She was drinking my coffee and pretending to look at my project files. I'm not thinking about him. I mentioned him. You mentioned him 4 times in the last 20 minutes while supposedly talking to me about your contractor problem. I took her coffee away and then gave it back. He said something that was actually useful. About finding someone who's done the forensic structural problem before. And he was right. Priscilla looked at me over her mug. What does he look like? Like Callum but sharper how? I tried to find the right word and then gave up. Like Callum decided to be warm on purpose and Donovan never made that decision. It's not coldness exactly. It's just, he doesn't try to be approachable. He doesn't feel like he needs to be. Priscilla set down her mug. Imogen, I know. You've been dating Callum for 2 months. Callum, who remembers that you hate cilantro and texts you every single morning. I know. Callum, who is by your own description the most genuinely kind man you've dated in 6 years. I know, Priscilla. She looked at me. So why does your face do that thing when you talk about his brother? I didn't answer, because I didn't have one that didn't implicate me. I didn't see Donovan again for 3 weeks. I told myself I wasn't paying attention to that. I threw myself into the hotel project with a focus that my project manager described as actually kind of concerning. Imogen, go home. Callum and I settled back into our rhythm. Dinners, weekend mornings, the easy texture of a relationship that hadn't hit any hard edges yet. He was good to me. I kept coming back to that. He was so genuinely, uncomplicated good to me. My phone started getting texts from a number I didn't recognize, 2 days before I saw Donovan again. The forensic structural issue. Halverson Group in Chicago did something similar on the Palmer House restoration in 2019. Worth a call. I stared at it. How did you get this number? Callum's emergency contact list. I shouldn't have used it, but I thought it would be useful. It was useful. Halverson Group called me back the next afternoon and had exactly the documentation I needed. I stood in the hotel basement with my hard hat pushed back on my head and felt the project click into focus for the first time in weeks. I didn't text Donovan back, told myself it was appropriate distance. A week later, did the Halverson call help? I waited a day. Then yes, thank you, good. Then nothing. I deleted the thread. Kept it deleted for about 20 minutes before looking at it in my recently deleted folder, like an absolute adult. The second time I saw him was at a charity auction Callum had committed to before we started dating, and had forgotten to mention until 48 hours before. Black tie, he said apologetically, calling from his office. I'm sorry, it's an annual thing for the firm. You don't have to come. I'll come, I said, and I meant it. I wanted to be the kind of person who showed up for his things. I wore a navy dress I'd bought 2 years ago and never had occasion for. Callum met me in the lobby, looking handsome and relieved, and kissed me with the simple warmth that had been the foundation of everything between us. I knew before we'd been in the room 10 minutes that Donovan was there. Something in the geometry of the space shifted, the way a pressure system changes before a storm you can't see yet. He appeared at my left shoulder while Callum was across the room talking to a client. Miss Voss, Mr. Hale. I kept my eyes on the room. Callum didn't mention you'd be here. He didn't know. A pause. You look different. I finally looked at him. He was in a dark suit with a white shirt, no tie, the top button open. It was almost aggressively similar to the way I'd seen Callum dress on formal occasions, and yet the effect was entirely different. Different from what? From Thanksgiving. Less like you're solving a problem. I'm always solving a problem. I know, he said. But tonight you're less visible about it. Callum reappeared then, took in the scene, and put his hand on my back with a deliberateness that wasn't like him. Donovan, didn't know you were coming. Last minute. Donovan's expression was neutral. Imogen was telling me the hotel project has resolved. Partially, I said quickly. The structural issue, yes. The timeline's still tight, Donovan finished. He looked at Callum. You have a talented partner. Something about the word partner landed oddly. Callum smiled, but his eyes didn't fully follow. I know that. The evening went sideways somewhere around the third auction item, not in any dramatic way. No scenes, no confrontations. Just the constant low-grade awareness of Donovan 3 tables over, watching the room, occasionally looking at me, and then looking away with the unhurried patience of someone who had decided to wait. At one point, I excused myself and went to find water at the far end of the bar. Donovan appeared beside me approximately 90 seconds later. You're not enjoying yourself, he said. I'm enjoying myself fine. You've held the same glass for 45 minutes, and you've looked at the exit twice. I turned to face him. Why are you paying that much attention? He held my gaze. Because I have been since you walked into a hotel bar and kissed me by mistake 3 weeks ago. A pause. Which I think you know. My heart rate was doing something I didn't appreciate. Callum is your brother. I'm aware. He turned his glass. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating a fact. You walked into a room and something shifted, and I think you felt it too, and pretending otherwise seems like a waste of both our times. What exactly do you want me to do with that information? Nothing, he said. Right now. I just wanted you to know I wasn't imagining it. He walked away before Callum came to find me. I stood at the bar and breathed. I'm not going to recount exactly what Callum said in the car on the way home, because it was private, and because he deserved better than whatever was happening in my chest. But he asked me, quietly, whether something had happened with Donovan. I said no, because technically nothing had. The lie tasted like copper. Priscilla staged another intervention the following Thursday. You look like someone ran over your favorite building, she said, arriving at my apartment with Thai food, and the expression she reserved for situations she'd already diagnosed. I'm tired. You're not tired. You're conflicted. She set the food on my coffee table. Is this about the brother? It's about nothing. There's nothing. Imogen. She looked at me with the patience of someone who had known me for 12 years. You've been in love with difficult men your whole adult life. Before Callum, there was the architect in Seattle, who thought emotional availability was for people without vision. Before him, the professor who treated every conversation like a seminar he was grading you in. I was 24. The pattern doesn't care about your age. She handed me a container of noodles. Callum is the first person you've dated who just likes you. Uncomplicated. And now his brother is paying attention to you. And your entire nervous system is treating it like a revelation. That's not fair. Maybe not. She sat down. But is it wrong? I couldn't answer. The question isn't whether Donovan is interesting, Priscilla said. The question is whether you're running toward him or away from something. I thought about that for a long time after she left. The thing that finally broke the 3 weeks of managed distance wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday afternoon at the hotel site, standing on the 4th floor in a hard hat and steel-toed boots, looking at a wall that was finally going where it was supposed to go. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it on instinct. The Palmer House project manager mentioned you'd asked about their timeline management approach, Donovan said. I have the contact for the consultant they used, if you want it. You're still helping with my project. I'm useful where I can be. I sat down on a stack of drywall. Donovan, Imogen, stop. A long pause. All right, I mean it. Whatever this is, the texts, the showing up, the paying attention, it needs to stop. Because you don't feel it, because I'm with Callum. The words came out steady even though my hands weren't. Because whatever I feel isn't the point. The point is what I do with it. Silence on the line. Okay. You asked me to stop, I'll stop. A pause. For the record, I don't do this. I don't pursue pill. I don't send texts about structural consultants to my brother's girlfriend at 11 at night. I want you to know that this isn't a pattern for me. I know, I said, because I did. That was the part that made it harder. Good luck with the 4th floor, he said, and hung up. I sat on that stack of drywall for a long time. I went to Callum's that evening with the specific intention of being fully present. I brought dinner. I put my phone face down on the counter. I paid attention to every part of why I had chosen him. He was warm and easy and made me laugh twice within the first 10 minutes. He pulled me into a hug in the kitchen that lasted longer than hugs usually do, and I thought, this is real. This is what real feels like. You seem like you needed this, he said. I did. He kissed the top of my head. Rough week, getting better. I meant it. I went home that night feeling like I'd done something right, like I'd chosen something and it mattered that I chose it. Then at 2 a.m, lying awake in my apartment, I thought about Donovan saying I don't do this, and something in my chest pulled in a direction I had been trying for weeks to pretend wasn't there. The Hale family Christmas was a command performance. Charlotte called it a small dinner, in the same tone people use when they mean mandatory and emotionally significant. Callum picked me up at 5, and I could see the tension in his shoulders before he even started the car. He'll be there, he said. I know, I asked my mother. She said Donovan specifically RSVP'd yes. He was quiet for a moment, which he hasn't done in 4 years. I looked at my hands. Callum, I know something happened at the auction. His voice was careful, controlled. I don't know what, but I know my brother, and I know you've been different since that night. Nothing happened. Something's happening, though. He glanced at me. Even if nothing's happened. I didn't answer, and he didn't push, and the silence in the car was one of those silences that means more than most conversations. The house was warm and lit, and smelled like pine, and whatever Charlotte had been cooking, since presumably the previous week. Fiona hugged me immediately, and started telling me about her daughter's school play. Richard made everyone mulled cider. Donovan was standing near the fireplace in the front room when I came in. Our eyes met across the room, and he gave me one small, controlled nod that said, I see you, and I'm keeping my word, and nothing else. I appreciated it more than I should have. Dinner was the same kind of beautiful chaos as Thanksgiving. Charlotte had made enough food to survive a winter. Richard was in a good mood. Fiona's daughter fell asleep on the couch, and nobody had the heart to move her. Donovan sat at the far end of the table, and spoke only when spoken to, which, as Callum had once said, meant something was working in him that he wasn't showing. After dinner, the family dispersed into different rooms. Callum got drawn into a conversation with Richard about a commercial real estate thing. Fiona was with her sleeping daughter. Charlotte was doing something in the kitchen. I found a chair in the library, with a book I wasn't reading, and after about 6 minutes, Donovan appeared in the doorway. You're hiding, he said. Reading. You haven't turned a page in 5 minutes. He came in anyway, and sat in the chair across from me, which felt deliberate and also like the most frustrating thing I'd ever seen. I thought you were keeping your word, I said. I'm not texting you about structural consultants. I'm sitting in the same room. A pause. Imogen. I need to say one thing, and then I'll drop it entirely. Can I say one thing? I set down the book. 1. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I am not a person who does things without being certain. I don't make moves without understanding the landscape. I spent 3 weeks staying away from you because you asked, and I did it, and I would keep doing it. He held my gaze. But I'd be lying if I told you the distance made anything go away. And I think you're sitting in this library reading the same page because the same is true for you. The fire was doing something to the light in the room. You're asking me to blow up something real and good. I'm asking you to stop pretending you're fully in it. That's not fair. No, but it's honest. He sat back. Callum deserves someone who's all the way there. You're not, and you know it. And staying out of some idea of loyalty is just slow damage to everyone. The word loyalty landed somewhere complicated. Is this about Callum or about you? Both, he said, without hesitating. I'm not going to pretend I don't want this, but I also genuinely mean what I'm saying about him. He's not a consolation prize. He's a person who deserves to be chosen first. Footsteps in the hallway. Callum. He stopped in the doorway and looked at us, and I watched his face do the thing it had been doing for weeks. The careful, managed processing of something he'd suspected and hadn't wanted to confirm. Donovan, he said. Not a question. Not a greeting. Callum. Donovan stood. His voice was calm without being cold. We should go, Callum said to me. It's getting late. I stood. Callum, we can talk in the car. We didn't talk in the car. We sat in the Hale driveway for 10 minutes first, engine running, neither of us speaking. Then Callum said, "Just tell me, I haven't done anything. I know you haven't." He was looking straight ahead. "But are you thinking about it?" I had enough respect for him not to lie. "Yes." The silence after that was a different kind. I could feel him absorbing it. "Since when?" "Thanksgiving," he exhaled slowly. "A month." A pause. "That whole Callum, I'm sorry. I've been trying to figure out what it means." "I think you know what it means." His voice was careful and quiet, and it was the careful quietness that made my chest ache more than anger would have. "I think you've been hoping it would go away." "Yes, and it hasn't. No." He put his hands on the steering wheel without pulling out of the driveway. "Here's what I need you to understand. I can't compete with Donovan. I won't. Not because I think I'd lose, but because the idea of competing with my brother for the same woman is something I refuse to participate in." He looked at me then. "So if there's a version of this where you're not sure, you need to tell me now, because I can't do halfway." I thought about every morning text, every remembered small thing, the ease of him, the genuine uncomplicated goodness of him, and then I thought about sitting in a library, not reading, counting the minutes. "I need time," I said. "I'm sorry. I know that's not a good answer." "It's an honest one." He pulled out of the driveway. "I'll give you a week." Priscilla found me at the job site the next morning and took one look at my face. "You didn't choose Callum," she said. "I haven't chosen anything." "Imogen," she held out coffee. "You chose when you sat in that library not turning pages." I took the coffee. "He could be pursuing me because of something with Callum, some old competition I don't have context for." "He could be," she agreed. "Does he feel like that?" I thought about I don't do this. The 3 weeks of silence when I asked for it. The specific way he'd said Callum deserves to be chosen first. "No," I said. "He doesn't feel like that." "Then what are you afraid of?" I looked at the building we'd been putting back together for 8 months. That I'm choosing hard over easy, because hard is all I know how to trust. Priscilla was quiet for a moment. "Or," she said carefully, "you're choosing what's actually true for you, which happens to be harder." She left me with that and the cold coffee and the 4th floor coming together around me. I texted Donovan that evening. "I need to talk to you." He answered in under a minute. "Name it, not your place." "Somewhere neutral." He sent me an address. A coffee place in the West Village I'd walked past 100 times. 7 o'clock. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with black coffee and his jacket on the back of his chair like he'd been there long enough to settle. He stood when he saw me, which was a small thing that landed anyway. "Thank you for coming," he said. I sat down across from him. "I need you to answer something honestly." "All right. Is any part of this about Callum? Some old thing between you two, where I'm just the current version of it?" He didn't answer immediately, which I appreciated. "There is an old thing between Callum and me. There's always been competition, comparison, the weight of being the one who stayed versus the one who left. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't exist." He held my gaze. "But you're asking if you're interchangeable with that history, and the answer is no. You are specifically you, and what I feel is specifically about that. I don't have a better way to prove it than to ask you to trust what you've observed." I turned my coffee cup in circles. "I'm going to hurt Callum. You're already hurting him by staying." I knew he was right. I'd known it since that drive home from the auction. "I'm not easy," I said. "I work too much. I get fixated on things that seem minor to everyone else. Wrong molding, mismatched materials, details that don't actually affect anything but bother me on principle." "I know," he said. "I find it interesting rather than inconvenient. The details you notice are the same ones I notice in financial structures. The thing that's off in the corner that everyone else has accepted as fine." I looked at him across the small table. "I'm going to tell Callum tomorrow, face to face." Something in his expression shifted. Not relief exactly. "Something more careful than that, are you sure?" "No," I said honestly, "but I've been sure of the wrong things before. I think I'm better at certain than sure." The corner of his mouth moved. That almost smile I'd first seen at Thanksgiving. The one that transformed his face for a fraction of a second. "Certain I can work with," he said. I went to Callum's office the next morning before I could lose my nerve. He was expecting me. I could see it in his face when his assistant waved me through, in the way he'd cleared his desk like someone who was preparing for a conversation they'd been bracing toward. Yes. I sat down. Callum, I am so sorry. You have been nothing but good to me. Genuinely, steadily good in a way I have not always known how to receive, and I hate that I'm here doing this. He looked at his hands. But I can't be with you when I have feelings for someone else. It's not fair to either of us. My brother, he said, not a question. Yes. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I started to reach for something to fill the silence, and he held up his hand slightly to stop me. I want to be angry, he said. And I am, a little. But the honest thing is, I think I knew at Thanksgiving. Something in the way he looked at you, something in the way you didn't look at him. He exhaled. Donovan doesn't pay attention to people. Not like that. I'm sorry. I know you are. He looked up. I hope he makes it worth it. Because if he doesn't, if he treats this like another thing to acquire and then manage, I'm going to have a problem with my brother that goes well beyond what we've already got. I left his office with tears I'd been holding since the elevator. Donovan was parked outside, which he had not told me he was going to do. When he saw my face, he got out of the car without saying anything and just put his arms around me. We stood in the parking garage for a while, not talking. Then he said quietly, into my hair, I've got you, whatever comes next. I believed him. I had no rational reason to believe him, and I believed him anyway. The city found out about us in approximately the way you'd expect, which is to say that within 3 weeks, the versions circulating in certain Midtown and Greenwich circles had us as either a great love story or a betrayal, depending on who was telling it. A colleague made a comment at a site meeting that I answered so precisely that the subject never came up again. Donovan handled the professional rumors with the same surgical efficiency he seemed to apply to everything he found unacceptable. What surprised me was his family. Charlotte called me directly, which I hadn't expected. She was warm and direct in a way that bypassed social nicety entirely. I want you to know I don't blame you, she said. I've watched my sons circle each other for years. What happened isn't your fault. A pause. What I need to know is whether you're serious about him. Yes, I said. Then show him that. Donovan has spent his entire life being competent and closed. If you can get past that, keep going. Richard said less, but shook Donovan's hand at a family dinner 3 weeks later, with a significance that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Fiona cornered me in the kitchen and said, more or less directly, Callum is going to be fine. He's already fine, actually. We're not supposed to tell Donovan because he'll make it weird, but Callum went on 2 dates last week. She studied me. Are you fine? I thought about it. I'm figuring out what that looks like. That's a good answer, she said, and handed me a dish to dry. Callum came to Christmas the following year. He was quieter than usual, but present. He brought wine and hugged his mother and argued with Richard about football, and did all the things that meant he was choosing to stay part of this family, even with the complication of us. At one point he found me in the hallway by the library door and stopped. The hotel opened, he said. I saw the piece in Architectural Record. Last month, I said. They got the molding right in the library. He smiled, a small, genuine one, and kept walking. Donovan appeared at my shoulder. He'd watched the whole exchange. You okay? I looked at this man I had chosen, despite every rational reason to choose otherwise. Who noticed wrong details and remembered them. Who had waited with patience I still didn't fully understand, and then told me the truth when I needed it instead of what I wanted to hear. Yeah, I said. I'm okay. He took my hand and we went back to the table. It wasn't simple, and it wasn't without cost, and there were weeks in that first year I questioned every choice that had led to that parking garage and the decision I made in it. But sitting at that Christmas table, watching Callum make his niece laugh, watching Charlotte manage 6 conversations simultaneously, watching Donovan across the room catch my eye with the particular quality of attention that had always felt like being the only person in a room, I knew what I'd chosen and why. Sometimes the right choice feels dangerous, not because it's wrong, but because it's real in a way that safe things aren't. I kissed the wrong brother once by accident, and then eventually kissed the right one on purpose. That turned out to matter more than I expected.